So, from that way we can categorize the different joining processes. First is the permanent joint, maybe welded joint can be considered as a permanent joint, and because coalescence of the materials happen in this case, it may happen either in the liquid state, that means cross the melting point is above the melting point temperature, or it can happen in solid state as well also. So, both can be considered as a permanent joint. Second is the soldering, and here also soldering is when soldering is done, joining between the two components, the solder material needs to melt and it can join the two materials, but not necessary to melt the parent metal. So, this also creates some permanent joint. So, similar philosophy also for brazing also, and this also called the permanent joint. And of course, rivet joint, this one kind of I can say the mechanical joint also, but this is also this can be considered as a permanent joint, but non-permanent joint in the sense that bolted joint and screw joint, because it is possible whenever required it is possible the disassemble of the joining materials. So, in that sense it is considered as a non-permanent joint, but in other way when rivet joint can be considered as a permanent joint in the sense that if we want to disassemble the components, then it needs to break the other rivet part. That is why it is considered as a permanent joint, but it is not necessary for the bolted joint or the screw joint. Semi-permanent joint can be categorized as the adhesive bonding, because adhesive bonding, when you joining two materials, we put the adhesive between these two materials, and after curing of the after certain curing time, the two components or two metals can be joined. So, that is the joint by using the adhesive bonding, but this adhesive bonding having some life, after certain time they can be disassembled, but that depends on the what type of adhesives we are using. So, in general this adhesive bonding can be considered as a semi permanent joint. So, in that prospect, or the different permanent, non-permanent or the semi permanent joint. So, this is the one way of the classifying the different weld joining processes. So, if we look into other way, the welded joints, so that is the classification of the welded joint. So, several joining processes, that fusion welding, then metal deposition process and pressure welding. These three main categorization can be done when you try to classify it of the weld joint. So, if we look into that, what are the different types of the welding process includes in the fusion welding process, that gas welding, arc welding, high beam energy welding and thermite welding. So, all these cases we apply the heat source intensity in such a way that it try to melt the basic material or base material, and then after solidification the permanent joint can be done. So, in this case, so here nature of the heat source is applied in such a way that it will try to fuse the base material. So, that is why it is comes under the category of the fusion welding. So, that fusion welding, the source of the energy here in the by creating the arc or chemical in the using the gas or using the high beam energy like laser and electron beam. But in case of metal deposition process, the sense of the classification is different. In this case, of course, we use the source of the energy, different energy is it try to fuse the material which solder material, but it does not fuse the base material. So, that is why the metal deposition process, in the sense that we use the another extra material to join between the two metals without reaching the melting point of these two materials. So, soldering, brazing and adhesive bonding also comes into under this category. So, that means we use some extra material to join between the two components without melting the parent components. Pressure welding, other categorization is that here you can see that what are the different welding processes includes in the pressure welding process, that friction welding, ultrasonic welding, explosive welding, diffusion welding, resistance welding and magnetic impelled arc welding. So, in this case normally the pressure welding means the application of the load is required. So, that actually try to create the joint or bonding between the two components, two materials. So, friction welding, of course, apart from the pressure, some frictional heat also generated in this case, that actually helps to covalences of the components of materials. Similarly, ultrasonic energy can be used in this case to joining. Explosive, when the using some explosive in this case the using some explosive and then highly deform the components is highly deformed, the high rate of plastic deformation will happen within the component, and then these two components can join in a solid state, create some solid state welding processes also. Similarly, resistance welding also, resistance welding in this case that we apply that resistive heat also, but at the same time to make the joining process we need to apply some mechanical load as well. So, in that sense the resistance welding of resistance, the it creates the, due to the ohmic heating, it creates the generates the heat, but at the same time we need to apply some constant pressure or maybe some variable pressure also, so that the welded can be done. So, apart from the various kind of the source of the heat or generation of the heat, there is also some mechanical loading condition is also required in case of the pressure welding. Anyway, we will try to discuss of all the different types of the welding processes as well individually.